ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it's the cat again. Welcome to the second part of the course. We have already covered the history and conventions of the musical as a genre, and today we'll start discussing selected works in greater detail, and especially from the perspective of recurrent themes in musical theatre. And the first such theme will be nostalgia. With the two examples I wanted you to watch, My Fair Lady and Hello Dolly. Any version is good. Both were filmed quite early on, so if you watch the film versions, great. So let's start with My Fair Lady. The musical premiered on Broadway in 1956. This was a collaboration of book writer and lyricist Alan J. Lerner and composer Frederick Loewe. So we have another great duet of musical creators, Lerner and Loewe, like Rogers and Hammerstein and Gilbert and Sullivan. Before them were such great duet. There will be more to come, of course. So the musical is based on a theatre play by George Bernard Shaw called Pygmalion. You may remember it from literary courses. And it tells a story about a young woman called Eliza Doolittle, who is a flower seller in Edwardian London. Edwardian meaning the first decade of the 20th century. So it's already set in the past. The play was written in the 1930s. It is set at two decades earlier. The musical was written in the 50s. The film followed relatively quickly in 1964 with very memorable roles, especially Audrey Hepburn as Eliza. This was a great hit, both the show and the film. The Broadway show set the record, as it was then, for the long run. More than 2,700 performances. It was followed by a London production, also very popular, and the film version, directed by George Cukor, won 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Actor and Best Director. So this was a very, very successful show. Lerner and Loewe collaborated on a number of musicals. They did not always work together, but it was quite frequent. So if you would like to see some other examples of their collaboration, you may choose from Brigadoon. This was the Scottish musical I mentioned earlier. Paint Your Wagon, Camelot, which is a musical about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, something very popular, especially in America. It got quite a surprise association with the presidency of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. This was apparently his favorite musical, and after his assassination, many people started to associate the musical, and especially again, a very nostalgic treatment of the subject, as, to quote from the musical itself, a bright shining moment. That's Camelot, this ideal England was at the time of JFK's presidency. The last collaboration between Lerner and Loewe, on the other hand, is, in my opinion, one of the most controversial musicals ever, even though it's nice, melodic and pleasant to watch. The subject is, the title of the musical is Gigi, and it first started as a musical film. It was popular, got several accolades, and then it was brought back to the stage. So Gigi is a musical about a very young girl being groomed to become a courtesan, to become a mistress, a kept woman of an older rich gentleman. So if you really want to see something very, very controversial, try watching Gigi, especially the opening number, Thank Heaven for Little Girls. I think this is really pedophilia on stage, and it's not criticized, which makes it the most controversial thing ever. But back to My Fair Lady. The play by George Bernard Shaw was called Pygmalion, and I hope you recall this name from Greek mythology. This was a story about a king who was also an artist, a sculptor, who made a perfect image of a woman. She was called Galatea, and she was so beautiful, so perfect, that the artist fell in love with his own creation. So in the myth, goddess Aphrodite, the goddess of love, intervenes in the end and transforms this beautiful marble sculpture into a flesh and blood woman, who of course reciprocates Pygmalion's love, and they marry in the end, so they are king and queen. The story in My Fair Lady is quite similar. I hope you can observe by now. So it's a story about a teacher and a pupil. In itself, if you remember, this is following the formula made so successful by Rogers and Hammerstein. We have the subject of a teacher, but usually a female teacher, in several of their works, especially The King and I and The Sound of Music. So here we have a male teacher, a professor of linguistics, so something for you linguists here of particular interest, taking a bet with his friend that he can teach a lower class flower seller to speak and to behave in such a way that she will be indistinguishable from a higher class lady. So Eliza, who wants to open a flower shop in a better district, agrees to participate in this experiment. So she is taught to speak good English. One of the main subjects of this musical is language, is the way that language really influences the social status of a person. There is the opening musical number, Why Can't the English Learn to Speak, which is very interesting. It really is a kind of rant of Professor Higgins against the way that his compatriots, the English people, do not follow the rules of proper grammar. So there will be a lot of language humor, there will be a lot of commentary on how the language makes a person. So we have the songs that actually illustrate the lessons that Eliza is taking, and then her attempts to use the knowledge that she learns from Higgins. There is a hilarious Ascot Gavotte that you may remember, a very memorable scene, especially in the movie, but in any version really, when Eliza is taken to the horse races and dropped in the middle of high society, and it's very distinctive the way that the high society behaves especially the dances that they do. The gavotte in the title, the Ascot gavotte, is a very formalized kind of dance that the upper class is doing to emphasize their perceived superiority. And Eliza, when her emotions take over, when she gets very emotional, looking at the horse races, she breaks the decorum. She starts cursing. She starts behaving like a commoner. So of course this is all a failed attempt. But in the end, she actually learns to behave like a lady. So much so as to attract the attention of a young gentleman called Freddie, who is a rival, because, well, of course, we have a romantic triangle, we have a rivalry between two men competing for Eliza's attention, perhaps for Eliza's heart, Freddie and Professor Higgins. So the romantic song in the musical, The Street Where You Live, is sung not by Higgins, who is a kind of grumpy, slightly older man, but the young lover, Freddie. And this is actually the greatest difference that Lerner and Loeb took with George Bernard Shaw's theatre play. In the play, Eliza stays with Freddie. This is said explicitly that she was schooled by Professor Higgins, but she decided to spend her life with a younger, more socially acceptable suitor, Freddie. In the musical, it is left open. If you remember the film, there is this rather surprising end when Eliza returns to Professor Higgins and he asks her, where are my slippers? Because she was like an assistant or even a servant to Professor Higgins, and she would even give him his slippers. And this is what he asks her when she suddenly decides to return. This is a very interesting moment, and I really regret that you cannot respond right now what you thought of this ending. Did she return to be his mistress? Did she return to be his assistant, perhaps, in his research? Was she attracted to Higgins as a man or as a scholar? Perhaps she developed an interest in linguistics herself, and she wanted to continue her professional collaboration with Higgins. So that's a very marked difference between the theatre version and the musical version. Otherwise, we have the themes of social class and teaching, but also a story of a Cinderella, a young girl, a poor girl who becomes a lady. Also, Victorian morality. Generally, the treatment of the lower classes, the treatment of the poor, especially visible in the person of Eliza's father, Mr. Doolittle, Alfred Doolittle, who is, if you remember, an alcoholic. And if you know anything about Victorian and Edwardian culture and literature, alcoholism, especially among the poor, was a very serious problem. And this was no laughing matter. And suddenly, in My Fair Lady, we have the problem of the abuse of alcohol treated as a comedic subject. And Alfred Doolittle is not a dangerous character. He is not a violent alcoholic. He is not even presented as a bad father. He is basically a likable person, although there is a lot of social criticism. And one of the excerpts that I would like you to watch is a little exchange between Alfred Doolittle and the two professors, including Higgins, talking about a very Victorian concept of the undeserving poor. Undeserving poor were the people who, according to Victorian standards of morality, did not qualify because of their low moral standards to charity, to public help. And Alfred Doolittle agrees that he is very much an undeserving poor, but in his opinion, it doesn't mean that he should get the money. Perhaps even more, he should get the money. So let's now move to the subject of nostalgia and the uses of comedy in this matter.